Let's spend the next 30 minutes or so in the excellent company of former Conservative Government advisor James Price. Hi, James.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Well, I've selected for you what I think, for me, is possibly the story of the day. It is that on Thursday, in 2 days' time, Lucy Connolly goes to the appeal court to appeal against her 31-month sentence for, during the Southport riots, basically posting some hurty words on X, on Twitter. Something along the lines of, you know, mass deportations now, set fire to the hotels and all this kind of... Nobody is condoning that. She's very regretful herself. She took that post down after 3 hours. Unfortunately, it had already been seen by 300,000 people. Now, you know, not her finest hour. She's the first to admit that. But did she deserve 31 months in jail? There are many, many more people who went to jail. About 12 people went to jail for posts that they made on social media. 385 people altogether after the Southport riots, summer riots, received immediate custodial sentences. 12 were jailed, as I say, for social media posts, allegedly for inciting unrest and stirring up racial hatred. There was a guy called Tyler Kay, 26 years old. While Lucy got 31 months, Tyler Kay got 38 months for calling for asylum seeker hotels to be set on fire. This is lamentable. You know, they shouldn't make these posts. But I say that in a free country like Britain, no one should ever go to jail for what they write. Lucy Connolly was hundreds of miles away when she made this post. The fact she's in jail for a grotesquely long time, 31 months, I think is a stain on our legal system, a stain on our justice system, and she deserves to win her appeal. She should never have been sent to jail, should she?
I think you're right, morally speaking, certainly. I mean, the problem we've got is that there are lots of laws now on the statute book in this country that very carefully says things that people can and cannot say. And if you want to be a free speech absolutist, that's fine. I think that there should be some kind of sensible discussion about what people can and can't be allowed to say. I don't think, for example, that you should be allowed to say in a public meeting, hey, look over there, there is a person X we don't like, you know, Jewish person, because there's been a lot of that going on at the moment. Let's all go and attack him, right? No one thinks that you should be able to say that. And there's a very direct link there between someone saying something and an incitement to violence. And I think that there should be de minimis, minimal limits like that there. But on this instant, what she said was awful. It was very unpleasant, all the rest of it. We can condemn all of that. She clearly took it down a few hours later in the heat of the moment. And do you know what? If in the stories that we've been seeing about police officers going around to people's houses for other tweets and things like that, a knock on the door saying, listen, you can't say things like that. I'm glad that you took it down. You know you can't say it. That was right. A kind of old school rap on the knuckles would have put the police at me. I think that would have been a perfectly sensible thing to do, to scare someone into not misbehaving and saying nasty, silly things like that and thinking about it. But what's happened has been totally disproportionate to that, exactly as you say. And some people are calling it now a political imprisonment. She's certainly, I think, had the book thrown at her to discourage other people from daring to try to incite or say any of these mean things again into the future. That's wrong. I think it's high time that she's allowed to come out now.
Yeah, and as you say, these people were made an example of. It definitely was two-tier justice. You know, normally I don't think she would ever have been sent to jail, but these were during febrile times, and Starmer was desperately trying to pour oil on troubled waters, as in the Southport riots and all the other riots that went on. But there's this feeling, isn't there, that, you know, why is she in jail? There are, of course, Lucy has... we had her husband, Raymond, on this show a month or so ago. He's a Tory councillor. These are law-abiding citizens. Neither of them have ever been in trouble, had so much as a parking ticket, Lucy included. But there's this sort of feeling, isn't there, that this country is becoming less free than it used to be. I'm thinking also of this story that emerged this week down in Kent, that this former voluntary Kent copper was descended on by 6 full-time Kent coppers in a thought police type raid because he tweeted something sort of pro-Israel and anti-Palestine, and the police reported that his house was full of very Brexity things, as if this was against the law. And his Brexity things, by the way, were a couple of books by Douglas Murray. So there's this, the police going around, they handcuffed him while they searched his house. They carted him off to the Nick and interrogated him for hours. We know this happened to Alison Pearson, my friend and colleague on the Daily Telegraph, the columnist, same deal. Coppers turning up on her doorstep saying, there's a tweet you made, it's problematical. So all of this stuff, going to prison for something you write, having the cops knock on your door because you may have tweeted something that they think is politically dubious. This didn't used to go on in this country. This is Starmer's Britain, isn't it?
Well, it definitely is Starmer's Britain right now. Unfortunately, a lot of this stuff came about when my old lot, the Tories, were in power as well.
Yeah.
Dare say that it happened under Blair and Brown as well. We've seen a steep kind of diminution of protection of freedom of speech for a long time. Maybe there are a few people who are bored about hearing about people banging on about free speech, but of course it is the most fundamental freedom because it allows so many others to come along as well. And I think that we all sort of maybe forget in Britain what a precious gift something like free speech is, the ability for us to speak our minds and be able to have a proper conversation about it, be able to offend people and therefore, learn something more in the process is such a wonderful gift. If you and I, God forbid, have ever disagreed about anything, it would be a great old Barney. We'd both learn something about it in the process, and that would advance both of our sets of knowledge on whatever's going on. That doesn't happen in lots of other countries, and I think we're seeing now with some of the recently elected independent or so-called independent MPs in the last election who tend to talk about Gaza more than their own constituencies, that they genuinely don't understand why free speech is important and think that it should stop at criticism of at least their religion, if not all religions. And that is a normal feeling that most people in most parts of the world for most of human history will have had. You will have been an idiot to have offended the Prophet Muhammad or to have offended Christ or somebody like that. In most centuries, it would have caused a riot. And we're sort of heading back towards that kind of territory now, as we're seeing other kinds of rioting also kicking off. And I think this gets to the heart of this whole story with Lucy Connolly. The reason why the authorities freaked out so much is that Britain is getting towards this sort of tinderbox right now, where it won't take very much more awful, heartbreaking stories for things to really get very nasty for a very sustained period of time. You've got 50,000 people on the MI5 watch list as Islamists already on one side, and on the other side lots of people who've seen, as we saw in Southport, their daughters tragically murdered by another self-radicalized Islamist, and all kinds of other horrors where they feel the state is not legitimate in lots of ways. Academics are now calling this a perfect recipe for a sort of civil conflict, if not civil war, kicking off in England at some point. That might sound very hyperbolic to some people, but that is the sort of territory I think we might be heading towards if we don't fix some of these broiling social tensions.
I agree with you. I don't think it is hyperbolic. There's a real tension in the air. Now, here's another aspect of these people who were arrested and chucked into jail pretty damn sharpish for hurty words on social media. As I say, 12 of them, 12 people went to jail for writing nasty things. Nobody's approving of that, but it just seems to me to be a reasonably minor crime. Now, my question is would these people have been sent to jail if they were writing left-wing things? Because don't forget that Keir Starmer characterised these riots as far right thugs. Did you notice last week, and this was a really significant moment that not enough people took notice of, the police inspectorate, this was a police review of what happened in these riots, why they happened, concluded that the riots were nothing to do with the rioters' politics. In other words, they weren't far-right thugs. What it concluded was they were genuinely protesting against the migrant crisis, and they were protesting against decisions made by the government about asylum seekers. That was the police inspectorate. That was an official police report. So they weren't far right, these people, according to the police. And I just suspect that Lucy Connolly and the other 11 people who went to jail for what they wrote on social media, if they've written something left-wing and pro-Palestine, I don't think they go to jail. Do you?
No, I think you're right. And I think that although technically, again, there will be distinctions in law, morally, because we should never necessarily equate the law with morality. I think there have been plenty of immoral laws in the past. But morally, people understand and feel and are very angry about, exactly as you say, this idea of two-tier justice going on. And I think, as you say, if you were a lefty, if you were a pro-Gaza type person, you get off much more leniently. Let's not forget, of course, that in some of the riots or some of the protesting in favor of Hamas, they'll say it's Gaza, but a lot of these people were protesting in favor of the terrorist organization Hamas in our streets. And the phrase jihad has been kicked around, and the Metropolitan Police popped up to say, well, actually, jihad has lots of different meanings, and it could just be referring to a sort of intense internal moral struggle, right?
It's supposed to be that one other definition of it is a period of spiritual reflection. I mean, I saw those marches, the original marches, when the police were going out of their way to excuse jihad chanting. Let's see if we can find out a way to let these people do this. I know. Look, jihad doesn't necessarily mean killing people. Yes, we can allow them to continue. Trust me, those chanting jihad at those marches, they were not undergoing a period of intense spiritual reflection.
It's kind of something that we have to even say this, right? In any other time in history, a group of recent arrivals and students on visas marching in the streets, cheering for the deaths of a bunch of innocent Jewish people thousands of miles away, they would have been sent on the first damn planes out of here. The fact that we now have to realize that living in our country, living in our midst and amongst us, maybe people that you walk past in the streets are jolly happy about the fact that lots of Jewish people in Israel were killed and raped and murdered and babies boiled alive and all these disgusting, evil things. I'm pretty scared by that. I'm pretty angry by that, right? I'm not that far away from wanting to go on marches and shout to the government to get these people out of our country, certainly get them off our streets, get them on watch lists. So goodness knows how people in Southport who just witnessed this most evil of men killing 3 young innocent girls at a Taylor Swift dance party, imagine how angry they would be. Imagine how angry the whole country is going to be when it happens again, because unfortunately, with, as I say, 50,000 people that MI5 admit are on a watch list, let alone however many others there are, how many others have come recently, maybe even this morning on small boats. These tragedies are going to happen again and keep happening until we get real about the existential national security threat that we've got. And if they don't get real about it, you'll sadly start seeing more and more people taking it into their own hands. And vigilante justice is not a good thing. That should not be the answer, but it is what people will be forced to do if the government, if the state, if the police do not keep the peace as they should do against these sorts of threats.
Absolutely.